Hello, Chemistry 10 and Chemistry 10H students. This is Mrs. Altman, and in this video, I'm going to be going over the first type of stoichiometry calculations from moles to moles. In the part 2 video, I will be doing the other 3 types of calculations. So I'm going to introduce this a little bit, but primarily this video is going to be focusing on the actual process of it. What you need to understand is that a balanced chemical equation, not only does it tell you the ratio of atoms and molecules, it also tells you the ratio of moles. The second thing you need to understand is it doesn't matter if we have two things that are on the same side of the arrow or opposite sides of the arrow, the ratio is going to be the same. So I did list step-by-step equations, step-by-step instructions here because many students benefit from having those. That being said, steps 1 and steps 2, you will probably see that, say on answer keys of things that I do, I typically leave out those steps. And if you get to the point that you're comfortable leaving them out, feel free to do so. But if you're watching this video, it probably means you're having a little bit trouble understanding this, which is totally fine. And it's great that you're taking the time to watch the video. So I would include those for the time being until you get really, really comfortable. I'm going to walk through 2 examples of this step by step using this 3-step process. All right, let's take a look at this. So I look at the question, and I'm just going to look at the first one for right now. I'm going to get to the other one in a little bit. So I look for what am I starting with? And when I say starting with, I just mean the number that I'm starting with. So look in this question, and I find where do I really have a number? So here it's going to be 18.2 moles of H3PO4. And then what am I looking for? So if I'm looking for it, I don't know what the quantity is. That's what I'm going to find, but I'm looking for moles of H2O. And then for those of you in the H class, it wouldn't hurt to just go ahead and add that 3 sig figs here, just to remind you later that your final answer is going to need to have 3 sig figs. So then what I do is I take what I'm starting with and I put it over 1. And then I go to the balanced chemical equation, and I see that for H2O, there is a 6 in front of it. So I put 6 mole H2O up top. I find H3PO4. I see that there is a 2 in front of it. It's always going to be what you're looking for up top and what you're starting with on the bottom. Not that I recommend memorizing it, but some students like to have that sort of basis in their head. So I'm going to also write how I put this in my calculator. Not to say that that's the only way that you could put this in your calculator, but this will consistently get you the right answer. I put this in my calculator, got 54.6 moles of H2O. For those of you in the H class, your final answer must have the same number of sig figs as whatever you're starting with. For those of you in the 10 class, you're not graded on rounding, so if you did 55 moles, that would have been fine as well. Okay, let's take a look at the second one. So I look for a number, really, so 45 moles of Mg3PO42. And then for those of you in the H class, it wouldn't hurt to just put 2 sig figs there. And then the question says how many moles of water? So again, I'm looking for question mark moles of H2O. I take what I started with and I put it over 1. I go to my balanced chemical equation. It applies for both of them. I put 6 moles H2O up top. And then on the bottom, I find my Mg3PO42. I see that there's nothing in front of it. That really means that it's a 1. So I'm going to also write out how I put it in my calculator. Not there's actually an easier way to do it here, but for a lot of students who struggle with putting it in your calculator, what I recommend is that you do it the exact same way every single time. That way you won't make a mistake. So here, I didn't have to do divided by 1. I'm still including it here for the students who are maybe setting the questions up correctly, but are consistently getting incorrect answers with their calculator. You should do the problem just like I'm doing it here. Put this in my calculator, got 270, which has 2 sig figs, so I don't need to add any sort of dots for those of you in the H class. Let's take a look at a second problem of the same variety. So same process, it's just different balanced chemical equation. I look in the question, I see that my number is 0.225 mole of Na. So then for those of you in the H class, it's going to be 3 sig figs. And then the question says how many moles of S8? So question mark mole S8. I take what I'm starting with and I put it over 1. I go to my balanced chemical equation. There's nothing in front of the S8, so I assume that that is a 1. And there's a 16 in front of the sodium, so that goes on the bottom. I put this in my calculator. I'll put how I put it in my calculator. Strictly speaking, I could have left out those parentheses and it would have been fine. And then for those of you in the H class, I rounded it to 3 sig figs. For those of you in the 10 class, if you rounded it differently, that's completely fine. I look in the question, I find the number, 5.6 moles Na2S. For those of you in the H class, it wouldn't hurt to write that it's 2 sig figs. I look in the question, it says, how many moles of S8 do you need? So question mark mole S8. I always take what I'm starting with, put it over 1. I find S8, there's nothing in front of it, so it's 1 mole S8. And then on the bottom, it's the number of moles of what I'm starting with. I go to my balanced chemical equation. I see that there's an 8 in front of it. Put this in my calculator, 5.6 times 1. I could have left out the times 1, but I'm going to include it here for the sake of consistency. I didn't need the parentheses around the 8, but I am including it for the purpose of consistency. And I got 0.70 mole of S8. Important things to note is that you cannot skip writing mole and mole. That is important. Otherwise, our units don't cancel out. So always include that. And then for those of you in the H class, just be mindful of significant figures. And then the third point, which I've gone over a couple times here, but it's really worth saying again, it doesn't matter if what you're it doesn't matter if what you're starting with and what you're ending with are on the same side of the arrow or the opposite side of the arrow. If what you're starting with is actually a product, none of that actually matters. The ratios are all the same. That sometimes trips students up. So I just wanted to take a minute to discuss it here. All right. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.